Welcome to Boots Off, Log On, a podcast where we talk all things farm business. A show about the business of farming, bringing you insights and wisdom from the leaders in farm business, helping you minimise risk and maximise return on all your hard work. I'm David, and I'll be your host for the show. Hi everybody, it's David here again from Dowerin Field Days, and now I've got with me today is Janene Bon from HHG Legal Group. Now she's got a really fancy title, Special Counsel. We're talking about that, and I was just going, I need a title that flash, right? It makes you feel very special. So tell me what Special Counsel Janene Bon does.
Oh, what do I do? Well, special counsel. So what I do is, I suppose it just means I've been doing law for a long time. What I do these days is I do a lot of, I do mainly estate planning, so wills, powers of attorney, powers of guardianship, but a lot of my clients are business clients and a lot of them are farming clients as well, or in the agricultural, primary production area. But I also have engineering businesses, manufacturing businesses, all sorts of, I've got CEOs as clients, I've got other lawyers as clients, doctors, lots of people with lots of different things going on. Background is I did a lot of property, commercial law when I first started. And then had babies, had a little break for a few months off to have my son and then my daughter. But as that was happening, the financial planning industry was taking off. And all of a sudden people had a lot of superannuation and financial planners were coming into the fore. That was becoming a thing. And so I was just in the right place at the right time. And estate planning became a thing because people realised that, okay, we've got this wealth, we've got super, we've got some complex things happening. Not only do we need some financial advice and the accountants to gear up, but we also need the lawyers to gear up to be able to deal with our super, give advice on super, and actually estate planning became a bit of an industry. And the financial planning industry realised that, okay, well, if we get estate planners on board and work with them, we actually can sort of provide additional or better service to our clients by working closely with lawyers who specialise in estate planning and working with accountants who, so it's really working as a team, that's what I just fell into that at the right time. So yeah, I was working for a company called Cock Gunning at the time, or a law firm called Cock Gunning, and it was just started doing wills and estates, and then from there it just sort of progressed.
So how does that relate? So you've got a punter like me come in, and I'm probably not the most detailed person, and so I get confused between, okay, what is so you've got succession stuff, you've got wealth management, which is another whole thing, then you've got estate planning, and luckily my children are, I suppose, early 20s, so I haven't really got to the I probably should start thinking about it, shouldn't I? But
yes, definitely.
But how does that whole jigsaw come together? You've got the estate planning and the wealth management and the financial planning. How do we put that jigsaw together? Where does a client start? Yeah,
well, what we usually do is just start off with a fact find. So and it doesn't matter where a client's, what they've got or where they've got it, or whether they've got a business or they haven't. I mean, the process that I go through, or that we, as a firm go, and I'm sure other lawyers out there when they're doing this process do a similar thing. You've really got to work out, well, what has a person got, whether it's just a house and a bank account, or whether it's, lots of, quite a few family trusts, companies, if they got interests overseas, from the very, very simple to the really complex. You've just got to start off with the basic. Okay, what has a person got? What do they own, or what do they control? And who have they got? Are they in a relationship with someone? Have they got kids, or have they got other people that they want to care for? Or, who do they want to provide for, or who should they be providing for but maybe don't want to provide for, or so it's really just that. I always sort of say what someone's got, finding out what someone's got and where they've got it, and who they've got and where they've got them, and just those relationships between. So it's as much finding out about the person themselves, or often it's a couple coming in and working out, okay, especially with the family relationships, I mean, that's just as important or probably more important to in a lot of cases than what the actual assets are and the structures that are in
place. And I think that's the thing. So most of us, the most obvious thing is wills for people, but it's obviously a lot more than a will, right? So what are the biggest mistakes or assumptions that people make in this space? And you've been doing this for a while, and so you would have seen some really badly done ones and some great ones.
Yeah.
Hopefully the great ones are yours.
Oh, of course, of course.
So what is the difference between a very well planned estate and one that is dangerously bad?
Yeah. Again, I think it's just having going through that process, doing that fact find really well, just making sure. A lot of what we do is educating people on, okay, well, people come and say, okay, I own this, I own that. But when you drill down, well, actually you might have, $500,000 in a super fund, but actually you don't own that. You just control that or have certain rights over that. Or it might even be that you actually don't control it because it's in a retail fund. It's in an MLC fund or it's in Colonial First State Fund. The big one is assets in a family trust. So I've had clients coming in and saying, okay, I had one client years ago, or a couple, and they had all these properties sitting in a trust, all these properties up north in a trust. And they said, okay, we want to do our wills and we want to leave each of these 4 homes that are sitting in this trust to each of our 4 children because our kids are living in these houses. And so I went through the structure and I said, well, actually, you can't do that by your will because the assets that are in the trust, you might control them. You don't actually own them. Yeah. So we're going to have to do something. We've got to do a few other things, so whether it's by vesting deeds or you might have to wind up the trust or you put an intentions in your will as to what you'd like to have happen.
But then you've got other things, and then you've got, I suppose, in accounting. So you've got tax lawyers and things like that. So that's another, because it could trigger capital gains tax or whole lots of. Yeah. So trusts seem like a great idea at the time, don't they?
Exactly. And look, they're still a great tool, and used in the right way. But a lot of people really don't understand trust. And I've been working with trusts for the best part of 30 odd years, and I'm still learning. They're still. It's just us humans who make them complicated. But the basic premise is very simple. But it's it's just trying to get.
People aren't thinking? Are we not thinking as consumers? And I'll put myself into that box. We're not thinking about the end game when we set up these trusts. We're thinking about okay, we're setting up this to solve a problem.
Yeah. Or the accountants told me this is a really good idea to put this new business or this asset that I want to buy this investment property in.
But I'm not thinking that in 30 years' time I'm going to have to somehow unwind this or do something with it. But
or hand over control to someone.
Yeah, and so I'm kicking that problem down the road a bit.
Yes, and that's often, and I was just saying a minute ago to someone, it's thinking, I think as estate planners we're trained or we learn to think not just dealing with the immediate problem or issue. It's okay, what's going to happen? How's this going to be dealt with in 5 years, 10 years, 20? You've got to have some flexibility. You've got to have some ability for someone else to be able to take over. And often with trusts too, the older trusts generally cater for someone dying. So someone in control as an appointer or guardian or trustee. They'll cater for someone dying. It has a mechanism. Okay, well, who takes control if someone dies?
Yeah, so they get control of the trust, but they don't own anything.
They don't own anything. But then what happens if someone loses capacity, like they've had a stroke or they've got dementia? And often in the older trust deeds, there's no mechanism in there or very limited mechanism for someone to step in and take control if that initial controller has lost capacity for whatever reason. And so that's often something that we might be able to fix it by doing a deed of variation.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's not the power to amend the trust deed is limited and we've got to work around it.
And is there also this gap between intent? We always, when we write these documents or hire someone like you to write them, we have an intent in our mind and we're trying to make sure our intent is given pass. A lot of people have letters of intent and things like that. And is there limits to what we can actually do? I always someone told me, ruling from the grave, especially for all of us. Is there limits to what we can do?
There is in terms of, so I guess getting back to like a will, a will is really the outline of what you want to do. That's setting out the basic.
Like a big summary, basically.
It's really just saying, okay, the nuts and bolts of, okay, this is who I want to be my executor.
Yeah.
If they can't act, this is who I want. You know, you can cover even sometimes if you've got a trust, okay, if the trust allows you by your will to appoint its successor or appoint or guardian controller, you can do that in the will. Then it'll have, okay, I want to give X amount to, you know, Cat's Refuge and, you know, great-grandson or...
So you get everyone to... So you advise everyone to give it all the way to the Cat's Refuge?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, solves a lot of problems. You might have a few Family Provision Act claims, but yeah, absolutely. Very sensible advice, I'm sure. But, you know, so that sets out the framework, I suppose.
Yeah.
But letters of intention or deeds of wishes or just something that's often, because a family trust or a discretionary trust is what it says. There's discretion as to who gets what income.
So you're saying the executor that you've appointed through your will actually has discretion?
Well, the trustee or who's going to take control of the trust, if it's a discretionary trust, will then have the discretion as to who benefits from the income and capital of that trust. So you can write a letter setter
and go, this is what I'd prefer you did.
This is what I'd like, yes. So that's where the letter of wishes can be really helpful, but also setting out often what your reasons are for why you've done your will in a certain way. So, for instance, if there's an estrangement, say you've got 3 kids, but you've fallen out, you know, you've got a real estrangement for one child, or you've already given them an early inheritance effectively, and I've got one client where the farm's already been transferred or sold effectively to one child, and so the other child is going to get the rest of the non-farming
so it's explaining
assets.
that.
Having a letter of wishes to just explain that. So if there's any dispute or issues when, say in this case, Mum has died, there's her reasons for doing what she's doing.
When should we start? Like, I'm 52, right?
You're just a spring chicken.
I love you already. Like, in our business, I feel like the oldie, right? When should people start? Because we tend to, maybe I'm starting to think about it now, and I go, do we all start too late thinking about this stuff?
I think so. I mean, I've got a bit, probably an unfair advantage because I can just do wills, anytime. But my kids, and they both travelled when they were quite early, but they were in their early 20s. Or, 20, basically, was my daughter 21 and she was heading overseas for a year. And so I made her, she had a will, power of attorney, power of guardianship. My son got married quite early, so we needed to put wills and powers of attorney in place for him and his wife. So I think it's never, and people say, oh, look, I haven't got any assets. But most kids, if they've got a part-time job, they've got some super. Yeah. And especially now that the rules are changed, even I've had an estate years ago with this fellow, it's only 19 or 20, died in a work accident, had super. It was really sad, he had biological brothers and sisters, but in India, and hadn't actually even been formally adopted, he'd been fostered. Yeah. But there was no one, because he died and he had this super and life insurance sitting in the super fund. But because there was no one under the Administration Act or that the super fund would recognise as being his next of kin, if you like, or his...
So he had a
biological family in India, but he had no one... The family who he knew as his family were a foster foster parents.
So he had no legal next
No one legal... Yeah, and so them trying to get authority to deal with his super, whereas if there'd been a will and he'd had an executor appointed by his will, which would have been probably his foster parents, they would have been able to just step in and deal with the super company.
So is it about starting small early and then just changing it as your life? We all start young and stupid and slowly hopefully get more mature and grow up and we have more stuff. Yes. Right? Yes. Just starting simple when you're young and then just slowly changing that as you get children or own assets or... It comes on to the point at the moment. So farming businesses, especially where we are here around Dowerin and the rest of Western Australia, and I think nationally we could say, have got very big. And so, does that change? As these operations get larger and larger, so do people have to really consciously maybe revisit their estate planning as these businesses get bigger?
I think it's really important because it's not only as the business changes, but your family changes as well, or your loved ones, their situations change. So, I mean, we say in our final letter you should review your estate planning every year, but we know that people don't. But I think rule of thumb, every 3 to 5 years tends to be when things change. So if you think of, okay, I've left school, I've got a part-time job, and then, start uni, finish uni. I mean, that tends to be like 3 years, 5 years. Then I've started, I've got I had a part-time job, I've got a bit of super in there. You leave, you start working, you might buy some shares, or you might put a deposit on a home, buy a home, relationship. And I mean, getting married, that gives your wife or even de facto partner, that gives each,
So that's a great idea. It doesn't actually have to be married anymore, does
that
it?
gives you legal rights to to claim assets from each other should one of them die. But especially when you're talking about, farms or any sort of business, but particularly farms where, the farm might have been in the family for generations. Often there's, I've got farming clients where there's lots of farmland in different entities, like they might be farmland in a company, there might be farmland in a trust, there might be other farmland trusts, there's farmland in, individual names, some in joint names.
And some of these might be in legal structures that were set up in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah. Well, typically, probably not that so, but, that might have gone from the granddad.
Yeah.
But most often, you see trusts, not so many from the 60s, but the 70s and 80s.
Lots
and lots of trusts, and because they're usually really old trustees that haven't always been amended, or they might have been amended, but the trust laws
there was a lot of, I think, was it pre-60s, there was people who had property when they used to have probate, like they had
the old
tax.
Probate duty.
Yeah, they had a lot of stuff around that, didn't they?
And so that's where trusts started to come into the fore, because they could sort of get around the probate duty issues by having the trust.
So that was why there was an explosion of trusts.
That's one reason. Probably the main reason. So they did away with that, but the trusts, they're still, tax benefits, asset protection benefits, and just, if someone died, you don't necessarily have to, you don't have to transfer everything across to, the surviving spouse or the surviving son. Or
so there's plenty of people my age and older who've got, might be farming and might have land, or you could, there's so many generations now. You might be the owner of the land, you may not be.
Yeah.
So doing well, how do you involve your family in this process? So especially if you're the one who literally has control over these millions and millions of dollars of assets in our farm clients.
Yeah.
Right? How do you do this well? It can be messy, Yeah. So how do you do it well?
It's not easy, but it's that communication. It's having those conversations, and for some families that is just a natural thing because they just automatically communicate and talk. But I think for most families, that's probably the minority. I think for most families, these conversations are not easy. And we've got involved with Rural Edge, and I think you guys are also very involved with Rural Edge as well, which are a great organisation, and they're doing a series of workshops to try and facilitate the communication, the pre-planning before you get to the lawyer, and while you're dealing with the accountant trying to work out what to do.
So you want them to have the communication channels already set up before they get to you?
Yes, well, ideally, because otherwise, you can spend a lot of money talking to a lawyer trying to nut out this stuff when you haven't, and we're just saying, have you talked to your son about it? Have you talked to your daughter-in-law? Have you talked to your daughter about this? She wants an interest in the farm, or or how are you going to provide for... it might be a second marriage situation where your partner's got kids, a previous relationship, they've brought assets into the farm or might not.
And I think that's the thing. I suppose it was almost simpler when the old nuclear family used to be the norm, but it's not always the norm anymore, is it?
No, but even then, and even with the old nuclear family, there was often typically the son or two sons who'd take over the farm. Girls they were expected to marry well, and they would be provided for by their spouses. And so they weren't going to get much. And we still see estates like that. We've still the old wills. And so one of the first conversations I have with business clients, but particularly farming clients, where they're wanting to leave everything to the farming child and not so much to the non-farmer, you realise that they could bring a Family Provision Act claim.
We had that brought up, I think maybe it was heard from an event, one of the events actually, someone was mentioning about, especially at the moment, with I think we've had 36% increase in land prices. So suddenly people might have done estates.
Yes.
And they have evenly divided stuff, like you've got a house in South Perth and you get the farm and everything. But now one has gone up in value by, $5 million.
Yeah.
And the other one hasn't. Do you think this will, probably should prompt people to revisit that sort of planning?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where just checking in at least every 3 to 5 years, or where there's a major change, either
especially in
valuations or change in your business structure, change in status, like if you're going from, especially when you're going from, say, being actively involved in the farming operation to perhaps taking a bit of a back seat, and some control of some of the business entities have been handed over, or joint controls being given. There's a change in situation of, say, the non-farming family members, a child who maybe has fallen on hard times. They're not involved in the family farm business, but they've really fallen on hard times. They've got health issues, or their relationship's broken down. So,
and does this all just come down to human stuff at the end of the day? Like, we tend to worry. We do silly things when we worry, don't we? We're worried about our own retirement. We're worried about that, the kid who hasn't done as well as the others. It comes across sometimes that it looks unfair.
Yes.
I mean, you have to deal with fairness in your career all day, don't you?
Well, I always say, fair is not always equal.
Okay,
and
that's
it's which is a cliche, but it's what's appropriate, what do they need, and it's also, but you've also got, like I mentioned, the Family Provision Act. You've got this legislation in Western Australia, but also, similar legislation around Australia, that's the family provision legislation, and it allows certain people to make a claim against someone's estate.
So is that, in that case, so if, let's say, one of those really old-fashioned worlds where someone's just left all their farming land to one son, let's say, or daughter, and the other two have been expected to, you've got a career in Perth or Melbourne, sort yourselves out, you're good. This provision that you're talking about gives them the right to say, well, we don't think it's fair that one son's been given it all.
Yep. And that's exactly what it is. And more, I mean, we've got a big estate litigation, we do a lot of estate litigation, and typically it's these claims against the estate where a child feels, or it might be a spouse feels, aggrieved that they haven't received as much as what they think they should have, or far less than what the other child or children have received. And there's ways of managing that. And again, this gets down, it's like anything, plan early, and you can sort of head these things off at the pass a bit. And by and that's where trust can be. So when you make a claim against the estate, in Western Australia, you can only claim against what's actually in the estate, what a person owns personally, what the deceased owned personally. So assets that are sitting in a trust can't be touched. They're not part of the estate. You can also manage super, because that's effectively, a super fund is just is a glorified trust.
Yeah.
So you can manage that to a certain, you can put strategies in place, but you don't want to leave it to the last minute. You really want to plan for that. So, and sometimes we've actually transferred assets into trusts, or or even having assets in joint names with another person takes it outside of a person's estate. So that's where the estate planning really comes into play, because you are looking at trying to manage these situations that you anticipate could happen and minimising the risk of that, but at the same time being fair,
Do you know what? I think our clients farmers are pretty good at this. They're doing it every year with cash flow budgeting and forecasting. They are managing forward risk really well. They're really good at it. When you think, especially typically, like say a grain farm, where they're putting everything on the line every autumn.
Yes.
With this, and they're managing the risk for the rest of the year until they get a harvest, or through till it's in the bin, really. Yes. And so it's not so dissimilar, but it's just a longer timeline, really, isn't it?
But really, if you think about it, the risk is far greater.
Yes, it is.
If you've got a claim coming in from not really from left field, because you're sort of, as lawyers, we can see it. You get a feeling as to whether this person is going to make a claim or not. This estranged child or might be really close family, but the non-farming kids are just sort of bitten the lip and because that's what mum and dad have said, that's what's going to happen. But as soon as mum and dad pass, in they come and go, okay, well...
We call them known unknowns.
Right, yes.
You know they're going to happen, you just don't know what it's going to look like.
That's a really good way of describing it.
It's kind of like you've got no details, but it's there.
Yeah.
I think in our clients, I'd say weather is a known unknown. You know it rains, you know it doesn't rain, you just don't know the timing.
That's right. No, that's a very good way of putting it. Yeah.
So, Janene, how do people contact you? You know, where do they start? Do they just give you
Yeah, they can Google HHG Legal Group, or they can probably find me Janene Bon, B-O-N, no D on the end. I'm no relation to.
Yeah, there's no James
Bonds.
there.
No, there's no James.
So
no.
Bon with no E.
Bon with no D.
No D.
No
yes.
D on the end. Yep. But HHG Legal Group, and great website, lots of information. But yeah, just very welcome to give us a call or jump on the website, send us an email, or contact AgriMaster, and they'll be able to find us as well. But very happy to have a chat, initial chat, and we've got a whole team.
But if there's someone like me and I just don't know where to start, can I just give you a call and go?
Yep.
Okay, I just don't know where to start. No, just come in, we'll have a little chat, and we'll put together a bit of a plan.
Absolutely.
I don't have to know what I'm doing yet.
No, it doesn't. Look, it probably helps to have a little bit of obviously, you've been thinking about it if you're making contact. But I do have a lot of clients who I don't know where to start. And you just have that initial meeting, get a bit of information, and at least you've got a bit of a plan as to, okay, well, we need to get a bit more information together before we can really make a start. Or might say, look, have a chat to your accountant about this, or your financial advisor, or go and talk to AgriMaster and get some really good software. No.
Oh, thank you. I'll give you the $100 later.
But yeah, very happy to have an initial chat.
All right, Janene, thank you very much, Janene, for joining me today. I hope everyone listening has learnt something today. I certainly have. I know my wife, who normally looks after all this, she's our CFO, and she'll tell me you should have been listening all along, David. But thank you very much.
Oh, David, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure having a chat.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
As always, if you'd like to know more about AgriMaster Farm Business Management Software and Services, you can find us at www.agrimaster.com.au or find us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram. If you like this episode, please share it on social media or directly with a friend. And let's make farm business great together.